All right, we're going to learn how to simplify radicals right now. And you'll notice that I threw in down at the bottom some imaginary numbers just for kicks. So before we do this, you got to listen up. All right, that's right. That's the good, the bad, the ugly. This is how I teach this stuff. There are good numbers. I'm going to list them down here. You try and guess what they are. 4, 9, 16, 25. You guessed it. 6 times 6, 7 times 7, 8 times 8, 9 times, etc., etc. You can go on forever, okay? This is a free list of numbers. This is going to make simplifying radicals very easy for you, okay? So let's take this first one right here, square root of 60. Okay, you do the good and the bad. And if you do it right, there is no ugly. What number from my list, where'd that list go? It's right over here. What number from that list goes evenly into 60? Okay, so you could, if you have some stamina, you could test them all. Once you get the hang of this, it'll be easy. Anyhow, 4 goes in. So 4 times what is 60? If you don't know, get a calculator. 60 divided by 4, but 15. So this is the good, this is the bad. What's the square root of 4? 2, and you just bring down that radical 15. 2 radical 15 is my answer. Let's do another one. Okay, there's a 4 outside of here. Don't panic, just bring that down, and let's simplify square root of 45 into the good and the bad. What number goes into 45? I think we can all see that one. It's 9. 9 times, what just happened there? 9 times 5. So that's, let's put it this way. In this first radical right here, if you put in a number that's not on this list, you are going to get it wrong 100%. So that's why I call it the good and the bad. Anyhow, what's the square root of 9? 3. 3 times 4 is 12, and bring down that radical 5, and there you go. How about this one? Oh, this is pretty tasty. That 100 is on my list. So that's a perfect square. So what is the square root of a hundo? 10. And 10 times 8 is 80, and we're done. Okay, how about this one here? Let me slide over. We got to simplify square root of 108. So the good and the bad. Now I've done enough of these where I could tell 36 goes into 108. If you're not sure, just test each of these numbers until you hit one that goes in evenly. 36 times what? 3. So what's the square root of 36? 6. And then bring that radical 3 down. There's your answer. So that's basically it. Now we get to have some fun with imaginary numbers. Okay, how do I know this is going to be an imaginary number? Well, you can't take the square root of a negative, or at least that's what they told you all your life. All right, I'll use a different color for imaginary. Why not? Now, first of all, what are the, if you remember, there was an Italian way back in the day, he said the square root of -1 is I, okay? That means I squared is square root of -1 times square root of -1, because I times I is I squared, so square root of -1 times square root of -1 is -1. By that logic, I cubed is I times I squared is I cubed, so instead of saying I times I squared, we could say I times -1, because -1 and I squared are equal to each other, so I cubed equals -I. And then I to the 4th is I squared times I squared. -1 times -1 is 1. And then the pattern repeats itself, but that's for another lesson. All we need to know is right here. Let's do the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, well, -1, if we pull that -1 out, is this legit? Is square root of -1 times square root of 11 square root of -11? Yes. What's the square root of -1? Well, it says it right here. It's I, so my answer is I radical 11. Here we have 6 times I squared. Well, 6 times I squared is equal to what? -1. So what's 6 times -1? -6. Bingo. And then over here, check this out. 64 is on my list. So what's the square root of 64? Well, let's break it down like this. Let's do it like this for you. What's the square root of negative 1? That's I. And what's the square root of 64? 8. But nobody writes it like that. So my answer is 8I. Take a break.